national government and administration officers. I am informed that some of these officers are participating in this conference, and we will get to meet you as time goes on. Additionally, I will not forget the National Police Service, also noted, who have also noted an increase of women in leadership. As Assistant Inspector General, we see an overall increase in the service from 8% in 2015 to 14% in 2020. Of significant mention is the first all-female Special Weapons and Tactics, that is a SWAT team, drawn from the Administration Police, the first of its kind in Sub-Sahara Africa. We celebrate these female commandos from our police service. We also need to celebrate Ms. Zipporah Nderitu, the brainchild of the Polycare program at the National Police Service. Ms. Zipporah Nderitu is in the room. Please stand up and say hello to the room. Polycare will be the first comprehensive mechanism for sexual and gender-based violence prevention and response. Ladies and gentlemen, the civil society organizations have not been left behind in peace and security initiatives. There are many women participating in peace-building initiatives at different levels in our country. I will cite one renowned woman, the late Deka Ibrahim Abdi, a successful community mobilizer and global peacemaker from Wajir. I am also proud to cite our community peace builders in Turkana, West Pokot, Marsabit, and Mombasa, who have benefited from our community peace building and women leadership program. Many are now participating meaningfully in peace communities, while others, in the case of West Pokot, have been nominated in county assemblies. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today, I urge you to deliberate and share your best practices in advancing the condition and position of women in the country, and more specifically in their participation in peace and security of our nation. And now, without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome our chief guest, Dr. Rose Anyona, the Deputy Chief of Staff, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to make the official conference opening remarks on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary. Madam Anyona.
Director IPSTC, Brigadier Joyce Itene, senior officers present, conference moderator, Dr. Koni Muma, conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and happy Women's Day, International Women's Day. Now, before I commence this speech, I would like to pass sincere apologies from the Cabinet Secretary, Ambassador Rachel Mamo, who is unable to be here due to unavoidable commitments. The CS has wished all participants well and looks forward to hearing about your deliberations today. I will now read her statement. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the Director, IPSTC, Brigadier Joyce Itene, for inviting me to share a few remarks in this conference as we mark the International Women's Day to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women from all walks of life. We celebrate this day as a remembrance of how far women have come. Through blood, sweat, and tears, many women have defied odds to reshape narratives and conquer spaces that for a long time seemed unfathomable and out of reach. Discrimination based on gender is a question of power and control. If you recall, in 2020, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres explained that gender equality is a question of power. When men abuse power to control women and prevent them from achieving their full potential. So culture and tradition should not justify discrimination against women. If you look at Goal 5 of our SDGs, it focuses on the achievement of gender equality and empowering women. 27 years now since the Beijing conference, we are celebrating female heads of states. We are celebrating pilots landing aircraft during storms, scientists, doctors, military officers, heads of households defying all odds to provide for families, educators fighting for rights of women and girls to education in conflict-affected areas, politicians, ministers, you name it. We are celebrating progress that has been made by women all over the world. So today is the 3rd International Women's Day since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And I must appreciate the resilience of all women in the world, especially those that have had to battle the pandemic, while at the same time experiencing the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence and other forms of victims around the world, other forms of violence around the world. I celebrate their tenacity, resolve, and determination to survive Now, today is also the 2nd International Women's Day since we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. This resolution, as you all know, is a very important one that calls for inclusion of women as equal partners in the prevention of violent conflict, delivery of relief and recovery efforts, and in peace processes in general. Now, Resolution 1325 is unique because it not only stresses participation or inclusion, but it calls for meaningful inclusion in political life. And by this, we mean placing women in power positions where they can actually make decisions rather than apportioning token positions to merely fill gender quotas. I could not have picked a better theme for this year's campaign than break the bias. Indeed, gender equality and empowerment will only be achieved if national, regional, and international actors break the existing biases against women and girls that are responsible for creating barriers to the success of women in many spheres of public life. Women can understand science. It is not rocket science. Women can understand science. Women can lead just as well as men. Domestic chores and caring for children, they do not stop women from taking corporate jobs. A call to break the bias is a call for individuals, states, and non-state actors to take actions that will halt the discrimination of women along gender lines in our societies. And we believe that no woman is free until all women are free. Given that women usually constitute about 50% of any given country's population, when we discriminate against women, we are effectively locking out contribution and the potential of half of a society, and we are the poorer for it. A society that has incapacitated half its population cannot prosper. So in the area of peace and security, this is where there exists a lot of bias, or there used to exist a lot of bias against women and girls. Brigadier Sitiene has just explained that things are moving in the right direction, but this is one of those areas where, despite global recognition that the inclusion of women and girls in all aspects of decision-making is important, this is one of the areas where we need to just talk about a little bit. We have been told that a society that discriminates against how women and girls cannot be peaceful. So in short, if we want your societies to be peaceful, you must include this important component of society, which is the women. Now, if you look at Africa's conflict zones, it is true that women have been disproportionately borne the consequences of conflict. They have endured displacement, loss of loved ones, loss of property. They have been victimized through rape, gender-based violence. Some of them have been kidnapped and forced into marriages, and they have had to endure pregnancies, among other egregious and unspeakable atrocities. If you look at the Sahel and other parts of Africa, women and girls have had to contend with terrorism and violent extremism in their already fragile environments. We therefore must break the existing biases against them and embrace them and their experiences and knowledge when it comes to counterterrorism efforts, formal negotiation tables, peace-building activities, as well as post-conflict recovery processes. Now let's look at some of the statistics that we have. If you look at 25 African countries that were surveyed in 2020 in terms of women leadership in conflict management, you'll find that only the Republic of South Sudan reported, including women in conflict management, with about 12% of negotiators and 15% of mediators being women. Now, we have already said that the women suffer disproportionately, and therefore they need to be at the tables to handle to be able to present their problems. Now, on women in political governance, if you look at January 2021, data indicates that around the world, there are 63 countries that have attained 30% and more. That is around 32.6%. You know, we are talking about 63 countries that have attained a percentage of 30 and more, including women in political governance. In Africa, we have 17 countries only. We are talking about Rwanda at 54.8, Guinea-Bissau 50%, South Africa, Mozambique, and Ethiopia. So in many African states then, politics is marred by violence, persecution, intimidation, and torture, especially against women aspirants. Consequently, women are underrepresented at all levels of decision-making, and thereby excluding them from defining the peace agenda. We need to create safe spaces for women to not only engage in elective politics, but also foster a culture of political peace and stability. In peacekeeping operations, the UN statistics as of 30th April 2021, the uniformed female personnel in all UN missions across the world was around 5,600. It could have increased by now, but we are talking about 5,617 out of 78,000. So this is about merely 7% of the total. So we have a long way to go when it comes to increasing and meaningful participation of women in sectors that matter in our societies. So we have had stories of women in AMISOM and all that, but still the fact remains that women in peacekeeping missions in AMISOM, MINUSCA or MINUSMA, among others, we still have to increase. Their numbers are still lower than those of men. So we still need to increase their participation, acknowledge it, and give them meaningful positions in these missions. So we have work to do. We need to break these biases, to remove barriers to the recruitment and the training of women in national militaries and police forces in order to increase their participation in peacekeeping. I must say, and agreeing with Brigadier Sitine, that Kenya has tried to break the bias against women, especially in the area of peace and security. We have tried to increase them in public life, to make them in decision-making positions, as the evidence has been presented. His Excellency, the President, has tried to appointed women to cabinet dockets, ambassadorial positions, and other public offices that were earlier on reserved for men. The Kenya Defense Forces has done extremely well and recognized the potential of women. It has promoted women to powerful positions, as has been said here before. In our court system, we have witnessed the appointment of the first female Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court, who is also deputized by a lady. So this is quite encouraging and a sign that we are moving in the right direction as a country, but we still have work to do. So sustainable peace can only be achieved when we build inclusive societies. Inclusive societies are the substance of just societies. We must not leave women behind when making decisions about matters that affect them. We must fight for the right to education for our girls and women. We must live up to our national, regional, and global commitments to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. We must continue to have frank conversations, such as the ones we are going to have today, about the role of women in peace and security. We must also convert our words into action. So as you deliberate on ways to break the bias, I hope that the experiences that will be shared here will enrich our understanding of what is needed to create a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination against women and girls in a rapidly changing peace and security environment. Here are a few points that you may wish to think about as you deliberate. Now, number one, in the context of post-COVID recovery, what are some of the practical ways to encourage women's active participation in leadership and decision-making so that we do not leave any woman or girl behind? Number two, how can we practically fight the stereotypes against women and girls in our communities and amplify women's voices in workplaces? Number three, how do we close the gap between men and women in public institutions and private sector? Number 5, what opportunities did COVID-19 offer to end marginalization of women? And the last question you might have to think about is, how can young women and girls help in breaking the bias? So as I conclude, I want to applaud IPSTC for organizing this conference. Your institution is indeed a reference point when it comes to the issues of integrating gender into peace and security. So keep up the good work, and I now declare the International Women's Day Conference officially opened. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, our chief guest, Dr. Anyona, and thank you for those kind words. And she has reminded us about the theme. We are riding on break the bias in peace and security, to be specific in this sector. So conference participants, we will remain seated as director and the chief guest and the team, and also the panelists lead us to the photo session at the lawns near PCSS. And then we're going to join them for the photo and for some cake cutting moment around that venue. So director, madam, and the chief guest, you can lead us to the venue.
I was saying, can I use my